Disclaimer: this video is for educational and historical purposes only.
We are at the end of winter in this area. It's the last of February, and the time of the year, spring's right here on us. And most of the people in this area, this is about the time of the year they cut their beards off, plant their gardens, and watch the fruit trees bloom. It's a good time to making videos, talking dog stories. This is video number 11, and I've asked the different ones that's seen the other videos to write me questions, and I would answer these questions in a way of trying to create some more stories for us to talk about. And different ones has been asking me questions, sending in questions. This first question we're going to start on here, it come from Bill Reynolds. He's the editor of the American Game Dog Times out of North Carolina. And he asked, what did you see in Tombstone in that 10-minute roll to decide to match him into Bullyson Jr.? Well, Tombstone was he was one of the dogs in the game that, as we all know, he become a famous dog. And there's lots to tell about such a dog as Tombstone. He was a dog that's left record of his time here in such a way that it'll be in the game for years to come. And he was a dog that was bred by Don Maloney. Don Maloney, he was dealing with Earl Tudor at that time, and he had dogs bred out of Earl Tudor's yard. And he bred Tombstone out of his dog he called Toot. Toot was a dog that was out of Tudor's Spike and Tudor's Baby. And no, it was Tudor's Spike and Black Widow. Black Widow was a dog that Maurice Carver once owned, and he got her from Miss Hanson, which she originally came from Earl Tudor's yard. And she ended up back on Earl Tudor's yard in later years after several different ones had owned her. And when she ended up on his yard, he bred her to Spike, and that produced Toot, Maloney's Toot. Maloney, he dealed that pup at a time to Ron Petronelli in Boston, and I believe it was Rhode Island where Ron lived. But Maloney had he was dealing with Earl Tudor at the time, and he had some of Earl Tudor's very purebred bitches over at his house that he was keeping and breeding them, and him and Earl was splitting the pups in such a way as Don got to keep the ones that he wanted to keep, but the ones he didn't want to keep, he gave to Earl, and Earl was selling them. But if anybody sold any of those dogs, it would be Earl. The deal was with Don just to keep the males, and the females came back to Earl's house. Well, Don didn't, there's no way that he would have let Earl know that he sold one of those pups out of one of those purebred bitches, because it upset Earl very much. And when he sold that pup to Ron Petronelli, which was Tombstone, he sold him to her under the breeding of showing that she was out of a crossbred, an out-scatterbred female called Gina. But I never was able to find out exactly for sure how Tombstone was bred. But I always thought that she was out of some of those purebred bitches that Don had there in his yard. But if he would have ever let Earl know about it, I mean, you know, it would have been a breakup for sure. And Don wouldn't have ever let nobody know about exactly how that dog was bred. But I was just sure that the dog wasn't out of Gina. Well, Ron Petronelli got Tombstone when he was a puppy, and he raised him up there in the cold country in Rhode Island, and they always had him real fat, real heavy up there, and he grew up to be a big dog. He was big dog, match weight around 55 pounds. I think they wanted to match him at catch weight one time, and they found out his lungs was bad. They thought his lungs was bad, so they didn't match him. And they called the match off. But they schooled him up in that area, and schooled him real hard. He was, Ron Petronelli was known to really school his dogs hard. And so Ron had a male that he had bought from Maurice Carver he called Sioux Boy. And the dog had won 2 matches and was matched to go in for his 3rd match. And I was looking for a big dog at that time. And I'd heard about Ron having that dog and all the things that had been done with the dog and everything, and how Don Maloney was trying to get the dog back. Well, I had a friend down in San Antonio that owned Sioux Boy's sister, a fellow named Jim Rourke's, friend of Maurice Carver's. And Jim and I had been doing some dealing, and I had bought 5 dogs from him, and this female was one of them, Sioux Boy's sister. So I contacted Ron Petronelli and told him that I would deal him Sioux Boy's sister for that Tombstone dog. And he was real high on that Sioux Boy dog. And so we made the deal, and I sent him the female, and he sent me Tombstone. When I got Tombstone, he was a real heavy dog. He must have weighed 70 pounds maybe. He was just real fat. And so I cut his feed down and got him down to, maybe 58, somewhere around there. I pulled him on down pretty good there in a short time. And then I rode him, this 10-minute roll that Bill was asking me about. I think I wrote of it one time in a story, how that's the only thing I did to Tombstone before I matched him in the Bullyson Jr. But Bullyson Jr., Bobby Hall had won 2 matches with Bullyson Jr., and the talk was of that time, Bullyson had already been beaten, Benny Bob had already been beaten, and the talk was that Bullyson Jr. was the best dog of that family, as he was a real hard-biting dog, and he had lots of driving, pushing ability, and he showed to be gamer than the other ones of that family at that time of their breeding. And he'd won a couple of real good matches. And Bobby Hall was having him open to the world at that time. And so I got Tombstone, and I took him out my pit, and I set him down for, I don't think it was 10 minutes, I think it was more like 5 minutes. And Tombstone was the type of dog that he expressed himself so much that within 5 minutes, and I say it was closer to 5 minutes than it was 10 minutes, and I put him in with a big dog that was just some rough big dog, just a rough big dog, but wasn't worth a match. And so within 5 minutes there, Tombstone had showed so much to me as to what you're looking for in gameness. And he had plenty of ability. He had good strong body, good strong bones, he had good teeth, and he was a nice dog, real nice dog. But after 5 minutes, I just picked him up, you know, and stopped it and picked him up. I didn't want to get him cut up any, and I knew that Ron Petronelli had schooled this dog out good. I knew he had been schooled since he was a young dog. And at this time, the dog was right around 2 years old. He might have been a little less than 2, but he was right at 2 years old. Well, right away, I got in touch with Bobby Hall, and we got that match on, and matched him at 55 pounds. Well, at this time, it was Ed Weaver and myself had gone together, and we was putting a show on up on the Red River. It was right on the Red River. As a matter of fact, it was on the banks of the Red River. It was up on the top of a cliff, like. We we was at a point. And both sides of this point went down the cliff. It was about a 100-foot drop down to the Red River. And this land, it just went wide, it was real wide, and then it went right down to a point. Well, back here where it was all real wide, we parked all the cars back there. And on this point, we got like about 100 and something feet off of this point and set up the pit and the bleacher seats and had lights all around there, and we strung a little light rope around the trees to block anyone from getting off into the cliff. And this was a show that was going to be coming off in September the 29th of 1973. Now, this was a fall convention. This was called the Southwest Convention. And it was a fall convention, and the weather was really right at that time. September the 29th, you know, that's right, getting at the peak time of fall. It was a really good time for a good big show this way. And we started the show we started at Saturday night, but we let all the people from the motels out there and got them all there a couple hours before daylight, 2 or 3 hours before daylight. And we started the first match. It started, the dogs got into the pit before dark on the first match, Saturday night. And the first match was two big dogs. It was Norman Hooten and his Butcher Boy dog, which was a 3-time winner at that time. And he was matched into Pat Perry and Jim Stinson with a dog called Samson. And they was matched at 57 pounds, two big dogs. It was two of the best big dogs I believe I've ever seen in the game. And Tombstone and Alligator were two of the other best big dogs I ever seen in the game. We're talking about big dogs there when you're talking 57, 58 pounds, 55 pounds. Those were big dogs, especially in those times. It was awful big dogs. Well, the match with Butcher Boy and Samson, it was Samson was a 1-time winner, and Butcher Boy was a 3-time winner. And Pat Perry, this was his second time to condition, and Maurice Carver, he overseen the conditioning on Butcher Boy with Norman Hooten. And those two big dogs, they hit, I mean, it was like two tanks meeting when those big dogs hit. And those was two good dogs, and they really went at it hard with one another. And the Samson dog, he had dehydrated right at match time, and had lost nearly 3 pounds before the last 10 or 12 hours before the match. And he came in like close to 3 pounds underweight. And it put all the odds on Butcher Boy. Butcher Boy was the favorite, because this was only Pat Perry's second time to condition a dog, and he had missed on his weight. He come in underweight. But Butcher Boy started carrying the fight for the first part of the fight, and he carried it on through there until he started getting a little hot. And when he started heating up, Samson, he didn't get hot, and he started coming to the top, and he stayed on top for quite a while. Butcher Boy looked like it was over with for Butcher Boy, and both dogs had really been fighting hard. I mean, two big dogs that way, they was two good big dogs, and they really went at it with one another. And Butcher Boy, he went down to the part of where the Samson dog was over him. He was, you know, he was leading the fight, and he was keeping Butcher Boy down most of the time. And then the Samson dog started going down. And all during this time, the dogs was being scratched. Every time they'd be free of hold, they'd be handled and scratched. As Butcher Boy had made a turn early in the match. And Butcher Boy was the type of dog that would make turns during a fight. They wasn't quitting turns, but they would just, he was sort of an awkward fighting dog. and he would make turns in hope, circling a dog, trying to go in from a different direction or whatever. But that was the kind of turn he had made. And as they went on there, the Samson dog, he started going down. And when he started going down, then Butcher Boy come to the top. And then Butcher Boy started leading it towards the end there. And they was scratching, and both of them was showing some very deep game scratches. Both of them was both game dogs, and they were both showing it. And right at the end, the Samson dog, he started to cross and just went down and was so weak that he just couldn't get up. He was just, he proved himself to be dead game. He didn't make a bad move in the entire match. And that match went an hour and 25 minutes. Both of those dogs was bred very much off of Earl Tudor's yard. The Samson dog was off of the nigger dog that I had, bred from Earl Tudor's yard, and off of a bitch out of Earl Tudor's Red Bill family. It was a pure-bred dog than Butcher Boy was. The Butcher Boy was also bred out of Earl Tudor and Frank Fitzwater's yard. Butcher Boy was bred off of a dog called Marshall's Joe, and it was called Fitzwater's Liz at that time. Liz was the sister to Miss Spike that Maurice Carver had. And Liz was out of Tudor's Spike and Bud Womack's Mert female. And Marshall's Joe, which was, Liz was Butcher Boy's dame, and Marshall's Joe was Butcher Boy's sire. And Marshall's Joe was off of Fitzwater's Goldie, and a female of mine I had called Blackie that was off of Mickey Kern's Lucky and the Black Widow female. And the Joe dog, he was an odd dog also, and his sire, Fitzwater's Goldie, he was an odd dog also. Those dogs, that line came from Earl Tudor and Bill Leitner's families of dogs. And those dogs would fight sometime and make funny moves and everything, but it wasn't a stopping move. They was little odd dogs. But that Butcher Boy, he was one of the best of that family. He was sure enough a good one. And he won that match. And it had gotten dark at that time. The next match coming up was between Bobby Hall and his Butcher Boy Jr. dog and me and the Tombstone dog. And in this particular show, there was 6 dogs that was matched in this show, that all of them was worked here on my place, on my cat mill, and I overseen the work and overseen the feed, and had different ones that was with different dogs, and I had 2 or 3 of them myself. That was matched in this show. And Tombstone was a dog that he was quite a working dog. He was the kind of a dog that, he is the kind of dog that you just don't see many of in the game. He was the kind of dog that he showed his gameness in such a way as you could just look at that dog when he was on the chain and tell that he was a dead game dog. And there's few dogs that you can do that with. But when you seen him in the pit, it didn't take you no time at all to know that that dog, you had to kill that dog to stop that dog. He was one of those kind of dogs. Not all dogs show this. Some of the best dogs I ever seen with ability and in the pit and everything, they didn't show it. But a few dogs do show this type of gameness, and Tombstone was one of those kind of dogs. And before the match, there had been some, we had pulled up there, and Bobby Hall and I we had weighed Tombstone. And we were sitting in the truck with Tombstone waiting for Bullyson Jr. to be weighed. I had one of the boys there weighing Bullyson Jr. And Bobby Hall and I was sitting in my truck there, and we heard a shot go off and looked up, and everybody was just running wild. And they had a dispute there in the pit between Jim Musselton and Benny Clayton, which the way it started, it was sort of odd. After that first match, Benny Clayton and Pat Perry and Jim Stinson, they was there with the Samson dog, doctoring the dog. And Jim Musselton came up and offered to take care of the dog farm and everything, as he had quite a bit of veterinarian experience. And they told him no, they didn't care. You know, they was taking care of their own dog. They would take care of their own dog. And so Jim Musselton took it as an insult. And he went over to a car and made the statement to Floyd Merriman. He said, "Give me your pistol." He said, "I might have to shoot one of them Texas boys." And this young boy called Bull, he was raised by George Gilman. He used to come to all the shows. He's just a young boy, and it's like, you know, kids really never have any business being at shows, but there was a few that brought young kids around. But this young boy, Bull, after everybody had gotten seated and waited for the next match to come off between Bullyson Jr. and Tombstone, everybody had gotten seated, and Bull walked over and told Benny Clayton, he said, "That fellow over there said he was going to shoot you." Well, Bennett at that time, he had quite a few beers in him, and there was another fellow called Plumbo that Bennett was sitting there with, H.L. Plumbo from Houston. Plumbo, he was an odd type of a fella, but a very aggressive man. And he told Bennett, he said, "Well, are you going to take that? What are you going to do?" And about that time, Bennett just pulled out a pistol and started walking across the pit and aiming his pistol at Jim Musselton. And when he did, Louis Chink reached and grabbed him by the arm and pushed his down. And when he pushed his arm down, he let go of the shot, and it hit Jim Musselton in the knee. Well, and then the gun was dropped, and it was all over with, and everybody had just scattered. I mean, you know, they had just scattered. It was all lit up and everything. It all happened right in the pit, right under the lights and everything. So me and Bobby, we just sort of scooted on down when we heard that shot. We sort of got on low down in that seat of that truck and everything, and then Bobby got out and found out what all had happened, what had taken place and everything. So we got the match back on between us and everything. We ended up washing Bullyson Jr. first, and then washed Tombstone and came on in. It seemed like there for 30 minutes we seen people climbing up them cliffs where they had run off of those cliffs down to the edge of that river, and they'd have to climb back up and everything. We heard a number of different stories about that by different ones later on. But Jim Musselton, he went to the hospital, and he told them that he had been squirrel hunting and shot himself in the knee, and nothing was ever said of it. And then in a later show, I was able to get Bennett and Jim Musselton back together again, and they apologized in such a way as they stayed friends. They're still friends as far as I know. But things do happen anytime when you get a number of people together that way sometimes, and especially when there's drinking and carrying on. And at that time, we did make a big party of it. There was big shows. There was like 400, there was over 400 people at this show. There was people at this show from all over the United States. They had come from all over the United States to be at this show. 12 matches is a lot of matches. And this was a show where we was starting the show up, and we was going to let it run all the way through. We wasn't going to take off a day like some of the shows and go the next day. This show run all the way through with 12 matches. Well, we got the dogs washed and got in the pit and everything, and freed the dogs, and it was just like the first match. It was just two big dogs, 55-pound males, and I mean, they hit like tanks.